Been married to the sea for over 50 years, and for 40 of those, I was married to the finest woman God ever put on this earth, my Hazel. Now, the sea is all I have left. The salt has worked its way into my blood, my bones. Some folks retire to a golf course. My retirement is this old rocking chair on the porch, watching the tide whisper secrets to the shore. But a man who's spent his life on the water can't ever truly leave it. The silence on land, well, it's a different kind of silence, louder. The decision to go out one last time didn't come like a thunderclap. It was more like a slow rising tide, and my joints ached with a rhythm that matched the weather fronts, and my hands, gnarled like old driftwood, had lost some of their strength. The house felt less like a home and more like a museum of a life that wasn't mine. Hazel's gardening gloves still sat on the shelf by the back door, a fine layer of dust covering the worn leather. Her scent, a mix of lavender and salt air, had finally faded from the pillows. I'd find myself making 2 cups of coffee in the morning out of habit, only to stand there staring at the second mug, a cold monument to my loneliness. The silence in that kitchen was a crushing weight. At sea, the silence is different. It's full of sound, the groan of the hull, the cry of a distant gull, the sigh of the waves. It's a living silence. The one on land is dead. So I decided, one last trip, not for big haul, not for just a final conversation with the old gray mistress who had given me everything and taken so much. I went down to the cellar, the air thick with smell of damp earth and brine. In the corner sat my father's old sea chair, made of dark, heavy oak and bound with rusted iron. My father, Solomon, is a man who spoke more to the tide than to people, and this chest held most as worldly possession. I ran my hand over the lid, feeling the deep grain under my calloused fingers. Inside, beneath coils of old rope and a tarnished brass sextant, was his collection of charts. Most of them were familiar, maps of the coastline I knew better than my own face, but one, tucked into a leather sleeve, was different. Paper, the color of old sailcloth, brittle. The ink, a faded sepia, depicted a section of the deep offshore waters, far beyond the usual fishing grounds. It was a place I'd heard sailors whisper about in taverns after too much whiskey, a place the old-timers avoided with a kind of superstitious dread. In my father's spidery, elegant script, a single spot was circled. Beside it, 2 words, the Mermaid's Cradle. I remembered him late at night, hunched over this very chart. I was just boy, maybe 10 years old. I'd asked him what was there. He'd looked up, his eyes the color of a stormy sea, finger to his lips. Some parts of the ocean, son, he'd said, his voice a low rumble, are like a woman's heart. You can spend a lifetime learning their shallows, but you'd be a fool to think you know their depths. In places, they keep their secrets for a reason. He never spoke of it again. The memory sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cellar's chill. A warning, a piece of inherited fear. But now it felt like an invitation, a final secret to uncover. Down at the marina, loading supplies on the Esther May, sturdy old boat named for my mother, I got the expected reaction. Young Ethan, a good kid with more muscle than sense, and a boat full of fancy electronics, came over while I was securing my line. Taking her out for a long one, Earl? Wiping grease his hands with a rag. Just a few days. Got an itch to scratch, I said, looking up from. Heard some chatter on the radio, said, lowering his voice a bit. Some weird readings out past the continental shelf. GPS signals going haywire. Sonars showing nothing, like a hole in the ocean. Be careful out there. I finally looked at him. He had that earnest, worried look young men get when they think they know better than their elders. A hole in the ocean, you say? The sea's full of holes, son. Most of them are full of water. He chuckled, but his concern didn't fade. No, I'm serious. It's that patch the old charts call the dead zone. No one's pulled a fish out of there in 50 years. They say the water is still, too still. The sea doesn't run on batteries, Ethan. I grunted, giving the rope a final tug. It doesn't care about PS. Been navigating by the stars and the feel of the current my whole life. It hasn't failed me. He just shook his head and walked away, the way you do when you know you can't change an old man's mind. He was a good boy, but he didn't understand. I wasn't going out there looking for fish. The first 2 days were a dream. The May cut through the water like a knife through silk. The sky was a vast, unbroken blue, and the sun warmed my old bones in a way that felt like forgiveness. The worries of the land, the empty house, the quiet phone, they all dissolved into the endless horizon. This was where I belonged. The solitude I craved wrapped around me like a thick woolen blanket, peaceful. Too peaceful. By the 3rd day, the strangeness began to creep in. It wasn't anything you could point a finger at, not at first. It was feeling. The sea turned a shade of deep, glassy cobalt I'd never seen before. There were no whitecaps, no swells, just a slow, hypnotic rocking that felt less like the ocean and more like the breathing of some immense sleeping creature. I hadn't seen another boat for a day and a half. The gulls that had followed me from the coast vanished. There was no life, no dolphins cresting in the distance, no flying fish skittering across the surface, just me, my boat, and the unnerving, perfect silence. And then I heard it. Or rather, I felt it, a low, persistent hum. It wasn't the engine. I cut it, and the sound remained. It wasn't the wind in the rigging. There was no wind. It was a vibration that seemed to come from directly beneath the hull, resonating up through the deck and into the soles of my boots. It was a single, impossibly low note, a thrumming that felt ancient and deep. I put my hand on the wooden rail, and I could feel it vibrating, steady, rhythmic pulse. It was the sound of the deep ocean's heart, and for the first time in a long, long time, a tremor of real, cold fear. I checked my father's chart. According to my calculations, I was getting close. The Mermaid's cradle was waiting, and it was humming. By noon on the 4th day, I was there. The chart said so. The sextant confirmed it, but my gut knew it long before my instruments did. The water beneath the May had deepened to a shade of indigo so dark it was nearly black, a gaping wound in the otherwise blue canvas of the sea. Ethan was right. The ocean here was dead still. There was no chop, no swell, not even a ripple. The surface was a perfect, polished mirror reflecting the empty sky. It felt sacrilegious to be there, my boat a vulgar intrusion on some sacred, silent place. The air was heavy, holding its breath. The low hum I'd felt for the past day had now grown in intensity, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. It wasn't just in my feet anymore. It was in my chest, a bass note that harmonized with my own anxious heartbeat. I cut the engine, and the ensuing silence was absolute, broken only by that damnable, pervasive hum. I walked to the bow and looked down. The water was unnaturally clear, yet I couldn't see anything below. It was like staring into a bottomless well of ink. A primal fear, the kind a land animal feels at the edge of a cliff, began to prickle the back of my neck. I've faced down storms that could tear a tanker in two, been lost in fog so thick I couldn't see my own hands, but this placid, quiet malevolence was something entirely new. This place wasn't angry. It was hungry. That's when my compass started to act up. The needle, which had pointed faithfully north my entire life, began to twitch. Then it spun lazily, a slow, drunken circle, before swinging wildly back and forth as if searching for something it couldn't find. I tapped the glass, a useless old habit. The needle just kept dancing its mad jig. I went to the cabin and flicked on the radio, hoping to hear a human voice, a weather report, anything to break the spell. All I got was a wall of static. But beneath the hiss and crackle, I could almost hear something else. Faint whisper, like voices in the next room, too muffled to make out the words. I twisted the dial, my knuckles. For a fleeting second, the static cleared, and I heard a wisp of a melody, a woman's humming, faint, sad. It was a tune Hazel used to hum while she was in her garden, tending to her roses. My blood ran cold. I slammed the radio off, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Get a hold of yourself, old man," I muttered, my voice sounding thin and foreign in the oppressive quiet. "You're tired. Your mind's playing tricks on you." But it wasn't just my mind. The humming from the deep was changing. It was no longer a simple vibration. It was shaping itself into that same melody, the one from the radio, the one Hazel used to hum, a ghostly, subaquatic lullaby that seemed to be rising from the abyss. I felt a strange lethargy creep over me, a desire to just sit down, to close my eyes and listen. The loneliness I'd been carrying for years felt heavier than ever, a physical ache in my soul, and the music seemed to promise a cure. I looked over the side of the boat, drawn by an impulse I couldn't explain. The dark water swirled, and for a moment the reflection wasn't my own wrinkled, sun-beaten face. It was her, Hazel. Not as I last remembered her, frail and tired in a hospital bed, but young, her hair the color of honey in the sun, her eyes sparkling with the same light that had captured me 50 years ago. She was smiling, a sad, gentle smile, and she lifted a hand, beckoning me. The vision was so real I could almost feel the phantom warmth of her touch on my cheek. She didn't speak. A thought bloomed in my mind, a thought that wasn't my own. "It's so peaceful down here, Earl. No more pain, no more loneliness. Rest, come rest." The pull of that promise was a physical force. My body sagged against the rail. The years of waking up alone, of silent dinners, of a life that had lost its color, it all washed over me. The ocean wasn't threatening me. It was offering me what I wanted, an end to the ache, a reunion. It was the sudden, violent jerk of the fishing rod in its holder that snapped me out of the rod was bent nearly in half, the line stretched taut and singing with tension as it spooled out from the reel at an alarming speed. My fisherman's instincts took over before my mind could process what was happening. I scrambled back, grabbed the rod, and braced myself against the stern. I'd caught giant marlin, battled sharks twice the size of a man. I knew what a fight felt like. This wasn't a fight. There was no thrashing, no panicked run of a hooked fish. It was a steady, immense, and irresistible pull. It felt like I'd hooked the continent itself. The line didn't zigzag. It went straight down, dragging the stern of the May lower into the water. The boat began to pivot slowly, its bow swinging around to point directly at the center of the dark, still patch of ocean. It was like being caught in a slow-motion whirl, but there was no current. The boat was being towed. The hum from the depths grew louder, the melody more distinct, weaving itself around me, urging me to let go, to give in. I wrapped both hands around the rod, my muscles screaming in protest, the old ache in my shoulders turning into a blaze of fire. It was no use. I was just an anchor point between my boat and whatever impossible weight was on the other end of that line, and the line wasn't breaking. It was high-tensile steel leader, the best you could buy, but it should have snapped under this strain. Instead, it held a shimmering thread of steel connecting me to the heart of the abyss. The May groaned as she was dragged inch by painful inch away from the world of the living and deeper into the embrace of the mermaid's cradle. The vision of Hazel appeared again, hovering just above the water's surface, her expression now one of peaceful expectation. The whispers on the radio started up again, even though the power was a chorus of soft, indecipherable voices joining the undersea lullaby. The ocean demanded I stay, and it was pulling me ever so gently into its eternal, silent home, and a weary, broken part of me almost wanted to go. My arms burned, my back a column of fire, and the world had shrunk to the straining rod, the taut line, and the inexorable pull from the deep. The May was being drawn into the heart of that inky darkness like a moth aflame. The sun seemed dimmer, the air colder. The melodic humming wasn't just in my ears anymore. It was inside my skull, a siren song that promised an end to all striving, a final peaceful. The image of Hazel shimmered at the edge of my vision, her hand still outstretched, her smile a mixture of love and pity. Just let go, the thought whispered in my mind. It's time to come home. I was losing every ounce of strength I had, honed by a lifetime of wrestling with the sea, was nothing against this patient, titanic force. My knuckles, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was an old man, and my strength was finite. The ocean's patient eternal. The stern dipped lower, and a trickle of cold, dark water on my boots. A first kiss for the abyss. For a moment, considered it. I truly did. What was left for me on land? An empty house. Fading memories. The slow, undignified decay of a body that had outlived its purpose. Down there, in the quiet dark, was Hazel. Peace. An end to the long, lonely watches of the night. My grip began to slacken. Then something small and hard pressed against my chest. The old silver locket I always wore. It had been Hazel's. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of her, and on the other side, one of our granddaughter, Ruby, taken on her 5th birthday. Ruby, with her gap-toothed grin and eyes the color of a summer sky, her small hand holding a bright yellow dandelion. The cold metal against my skin was a jolt, spark of reality in the hypnotic dream the ocean was weaving. Ruby, she was 9 now. I'd promised I'd teach her how to tie a proper fisherman's knot. I'd promised I'd take her out on the Ester May when she was old enough, show her where the dolphins play in the bay. I'd promised to be there for her 10th birthday. A promise made on land, a promise to the living. The vision of Hazel wavered. Her beckoning smile seemed to fade, replaced by a look of profound sadness, as if she understood. The choice wasn't between life and death. It was between 2 different kinds of love. The love for what was lost, the love for what still remained. The ocean offered a reunion with a ghost. The land offered a future with my granddaughter. With a roar that was torn from the very bottom of my soul, a sound of grief and rage and a desperate burning will to live, I found a final reserve of strength. I wasn't going to let go of the rod. My pride wouldn't allow it, and I couldn't cut the line without letting go. My eyes darted around the deck, searching for a solution. My gaze fell upon the old, heavy gaffing hook lying by the bait box. It was foolish idea. Leaning back, using my entire body as a counterweight, I managed to free one hand for a split second. I lunged, my fingers closing around the gaff's wooden handle, bracing the rod against my hip. With a grunt of pain, I swung the heavy steel hook in a wild arc. The first swing missed, the hook clanging uselessly against the stern. The second swing connected. The sharp point bit deep into the taut steel leader just below the rod tip. Now for the impossible part. I held the rod with my left hand and the gaff. The strain was immense, threatening to tear my arms from their socket. I planted my feet, leaned back, and pulled the 2 apart with every shred of life left in me. For a moment, the line was too strong. The boat dipped again, water swirling around my ankle. Humming from the deep rose to a crescendo, immense, mournful appointment. Then, with a sound like a pistol shot that echoed across the dead-still water, the line snapped. The release of tension was so sudden and violent it threw me backward. I crashed against the cabin wall, the rod and gaff flying from my hands and clattering to the deck. The Ester May bobbed up, freed from the immense weight, and instantly everything changed. The deep, pervasive hum stopped. It didn't fade away. It simply ceased, as if a switch had been thrown. The whispers from the radio died. The compass needle gave one last shudder and swung back to point north. Steady and true, the vision of Hazel was gone. A light breeze sprang up from the west, ruffling the surface of the water, breaking the unnatural, glassy calm. The dark indigo of the water seemed to lighten, returning to the normal deep blue of the open ocean. It was over. The spell was broken. I lay on the deck for a long time, gasping for air, my heart feeling like a wild bird trying to beat its way out of my chest. My whole body screamed in protest, but I was alive, free. I pushed myself up, my limbs trembling, and looked over the stern. There was no sign of what I had hooked, no wreckage, no creature, nothing, just the endless, indifferent sea. The Mermaid's cradle had made its offer, and I had refused. Without a second glance, I stumbled into the cabin, my hand shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to turn the key in the ignition. The old engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. Its familiar, ugly noise, the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I spun the wheel, turning the Estermay's bow toward home, and pushed the throttle forward. I didn't look back. I knew there was nothing to see. The sea keeps its... My father was right, and I was content to let it keep this one. The long journey back self, to the man who makes coffee for one, still has promises to keep. The ocean had demanded I stay with it forever. It had offered me a peaceful, dark eternity. But the thought of a little girl's gap-toothed smile, I realized, is a much stronger anchor. It's the one that holds you to the world. I don't go out on the deep water. The Estermay stays in the bay now, where the gulls are loud and the water is a friendly green. Sometimes I take Ruby out with. I show her how to bait a hook, how to read the clouds. I watch her face light up when she feels that first tug on her line. And in those moments, I know I made the right. The sea will claim every sailor in the end. It's the nature of things. But it will have to wait its turn. I have a few more knots to teach first. I hope my stories from the deep have brought a bit of the ocean's mystery to you. If you want to hear more tales from an old fisherman, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification. It means the world to an old man with stories to tell. The most powerful anchors in life are not the ones we drop in the sea, the bonds of love that tie us to the world of the living. True peace is found not in escaping sorrow, but in embracing the responsibility and joy. Thank you for listening to me. If these memories from the sea resonate with you, please subscribe and enable notifications. There are many more tides to explore together.